Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Unfollowing Mum. Thank you for joining me this week. I have a guest with me. Our guest this week has chosen to stay anonymous, which if any of you do want to come and chat on the podcast and talk about your experiences, you're always welcome to do so and remain anonymous. This is the whole point to this podcast, is to be a safe space where we can share our experiences and find that relatability and know that we're not alone. So hi, welcome.
Hello. It's
Hi.
nice to be here.
Ish, yeah, it's always an ish there, isn't it? It's not necessarily nice, not necessarily fun, but it's good to meet you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. It's a little bit nerve-wracking coming on, but as I say, it's good to share experiences, and it's helped me a lot listening to your podcast. So yeah, I'm happy to be here and sharing my story, really.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things that we have with this podcast, and I know you mentioned that you're a big fan of Helen Villas and Katie McKenna
Yeah.
and their Insight podcast. One of the most powerful things about podcasts like these is that it's real life stories, it's real life experiences, and it's not necessarily just professional opinions on those experiences either. It's actually hearing other people talking about what they've been through, and that makes a big difference. So can you tell me a little bit about what your experience has been? I know that's a really vast question, but let us know a little bit about what you've been through.
It's a vast question. Many people, obviously, there's a huge story behind everything, but I mean, if I can try and cut it short for you. So I think my mum may be a covert narcissist and my dad an overt narcissist, which I wasn't quite sure what that was before I started listening to podcasts. But my dad's the typical over the top. I mean, when we're at home, everybody does what he says. It depends on his moods, and you know that you're going to be in for a bad day if he's woken up and his mood it's not right. You also, I find he's very, what's the word? When somebody sort of like, if he's happy, everybody else has to be happy. If he's miserable, everybody else has to be miserable. So the mood of the house always determined on my dad.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be on sort of like the bad side of it. However, he did also work a lot. So there was sort of a little bit of breathing space from him, if you like, which was quite nice. My mum, I've always seen as the good person, the good parent, the go-to parent, the one that, she did no wrong. She was the savior. And it wasn't until sort of like I've got to the stage in my life where I've had babies and realized that you get these sort of like times when you sort of like, is she the good parent? I'm trying to read between the lines here, because she's saying that she's trying to save us from my dad. She's trying to keep us from my dad, keep us safe. But there was so much emotional abuse there. There was so much, I mean, parentification. Like, we were so enmeshed with my mum. It was crazy, really. So I'm the eldest sibling. I'm the oldest, and there's like a 10-year age gap. And then I've got two younger brothers. So just a bit of a background. My mum and dad separated when I was born. My dad wasn't ready for children. And me and my mum lived with my grandparents. Then my mum and dad got back together when I was school age. So it was around five-ish. So between the age of 5 and 10, I was sort of like the only child. And I remember life being quite good then. I don't remember there being any issues, or my memory won't go back to that. Like, I remember it being quite a happy time. I remember my mum being happy. I remember my dad being happy. And I just don't remember any that would trigger that there was something wrong at that point. Fast forward to my mum having twins.
Okay.
And that completely and utterly rocked everything. So looking back on it, I would say my dad was very put out because he didn't have the attention on him. He he went to work more, because then obviously we've gone from a family of 3 to a family of 5. That's quite big. It was just me, mum and dad at that point as well. We weren't living with grandparents then. But my dad was very put out, and I remember his mood starting to change a lot, and he was very, I guess, jealous of the attention that obviously my mum was having to put on to my newborn brothers, because they're babies. Babies need a lot of attention. There wasn't a lot of sleep. And I remember a lot that during the day I would obviously go to school, but at the weekends I remember my mum having a nap a lot of the time when my brothers were born. So her attention was pretty much on those twins. And when my dad wasn't around, which was the majority of the time, I was the stand-in parent.
Yeah.
I did everything, and that was from the age, I was 9.5, but we'll round it up to 10. So from the age of 10, I was that second parent. And obviously, as I got older, I became the babysitter.
Yeah.
I would say I became very attached to them, and I did a lot of the parenting. I feel, and I still feel now, even at the age, I'm in my 30s now, I still feel very maternal over them. And I've had to take a big step back to be their sister and not their mum, because it's so hard trying not to step in, but I'm managing it. It's easier, obviously, now I've got my children, but as I say, when they were younger, I definitely had a parenting role and not a sibling role, which was, looking back, quite hard. Yeah, so they came along at this point. So around, I would say between the age of 10 and 12, my dad started up an affair. We're not obviously sure at what age it was, but it was definitely around the time when they were born. Obviously it was very secretive. It was very, no, I'm not having an affair. And then obviously it all came out. Now I'll let you make your mind up, but my dad thought he could have the best of both worlds, because he thought he could have my mum at home and she could be the mum and the wife, and he can have this other partner as well. Obviously, mum was not very happy about that.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
As I would be exactly the same. It's not the sort of relationship she entered into. But my dad basically said, I can't help it if I'm irresistible to women. And but bearing in mind, this is going on between, as I say, I'm at about the age of 10. I know all about this. I shouldn't know all about this at this age. So from, like I say, between the age of 10 and 12, all this affair sort of started to come out. And then I start being not only the parent to my twin brothers, but the sounding board for both parents. So mum would obviously tell me about what dad's done. Dad would tell me what mum's done, because mum didn't give him any attention. Mum didn't give him any affection. He was hard done to, because she's had these 2 babies and now she's pushed into the side. Can you see why he needed love from other places? Not only that, obviously I've spoke to you previously about this, but I was sexually abused when I was a child, and it was by my dad, and again when my brothers came along. So it was very much, I remember the first time it happened, and I obviously, as a child, being about 9 years old, I didn't know how to react to what was happening. And it was very much the emotional abuse of, thank you, because I'm not getting any affection and I needed love. And how can you do that to your child? Like, being a parent myself, I can't understand who can do that to a child. And I haven't told my mum, because I was a soundboard for her. I was responsible for her feelings. I was too frightened as a child to say anything, even to obviously teachers. And I would say I was always really good at school. So I would say I had a quite good connection with my teachers, but I wouldn't have told anybody. So obviously, as I say, when my brothers came along, that started and his affair started. But it was okay, because he was hard done to, because he was being pushed out because he wasn't getting any affection.
Yeah.
And I have since spoken to a counsellor, but only this year. And it was quite interesting when we were talking, because it feels like it was like a level of control from him. He knows that I was going to be too scared to tell anybody else, so it's not going to get out. He's got this other woman that he's getting all his needs met. He was using me to get any other needs met at home, because he obviously wasn't getting what he needed from my mum. And as I got older, so I do remember when it stopped, but as I got older, I remember he got a lot more cocky and a lot more. He used to take the mick a lot about, obviously, as I got older, my body started changing. And he would make comments about, if I was in the kitchen, he'd make comments about my body in the kitchen when my mum wasn't there. And then I just remember feeling so awkward. Like as a child, I've never been able to, I wouldn't be able to walk around without a bra on, or I wouldn't, I would never have the door unlocked if I was going to the bathroom or having a shower. There was no, I was just not comfortable at all. But then he'd make these snide comments and he'd make these remarks about my body. And then my mum would walk into the kitchen and it'd be so awkward, and you could see his smug face. I just kept thinking, like, I mean, looking back, sorry, how could he have the balls to actually do that?
Yeah.
To actually know what he's doing and be that confident to almost get caught making those sort of comments. And I think as I've got older, my mum, I've wanted to tell my mum, but my mum's she's had a lot, a bad childhood. She's didn't have a very good relationship with her dad. And I've had a great childhood because she kept me safe from my dad, basically, and his toxic behavior. And I just want to sometimes shake her and be like, were you living in the same house?
Yeah.
Because he was an awful human being. He was a drug addict. He didn't take alcohol at the time, but he was he was always smoking weed, and he was occasionally would have speed at home as well. So he was always on something. And when he was taking drugs, he was nice, he was okay. When he wasn't taking drugs, those come downs were insane. And he was nasty, and he, again, obviously he'd make the comments on my body, but then when he's coming down, he would start to say, oh, look at your teeth, or look at your hair color, or he would always point out something that didn't look nice with my body. Oh, your gap in your teeth, that's massive, isn't it? I've got my gap fixed now, funnily enough. And obviously my hair color, he used to comment on my hair color. Interestingly, I dyed that too.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I was always quite self-conscious about things, because like most people that listen to this podcast, your parents they pick your worst feature and they literally go for that. It's like going for the jugular, and it just grinds you down. But yeah, so just going back to my mum, so she had quite a traumatic upbringing with her parents. And as I say, she was very much like, well, I've saved you from your dad, I keep you safe, and you've had a really good upbringing. And as I say, were you living in the same house? Like, where were you? And when I look back, I'm like, well, you were always asleep. You were asleep. You were looking after my brothers, or you were asleep. I was a teenager at this point, so I was trying to stay out the house as much as possible. And if she ever left the house, I was not safe. I was not safe with my dad. I also didn't want to leave my brothers, because I felt that I was their protector, because he would always be nasty to them when she wasn't there. And then she actually left my dad it was around COVID time. So the whole affair came out when I was about 12ish, but they continued to live together, they continued to have a relationship, and I continued to be a sounding board for both of them. I moved out at 19, and then it sort of like all sort of started to stop then. And interestingly, as soon as I moved out, my dad forgot I existed at all. He never came round to the house or anything. Yeah, but obviously, as I say, that the relationship was still, well, I say relationship, they weren't, I wouldn't say they were in a relationship, but they lived together. And my mum continuously said, oh, I'm going to move out, I'm going to move out, but I don't want to rock the family home for the boys, for my brothers. But there was no family home. It was a horrible environment. My mum was always having to protect her children from what mood my dad was in. I don't really know what she was trying to protect them from, but again, inside, all I wanted to say was, well, what about me?
Yeah.
It was horrible. So fast forward, so she moved out eventually during COVID. So I mean, it's a good 10 years at least after I moved out. So she'd been saying it since I was about maybe 15, 16 that she was going to move out. She finally did when I was nearly 30.
Yeah.
So come COVID, then her mood started to get worse, and she started to get to the stage where she was like, well, I'm now all alone, obviously I've moved out and COVID's hit, so what about what's going to happen to me? This is karma. I shouldn't have moved out, I shouldn't have left. And then she would say, well, obviously it would have been hell if I was living with him, but she wouldn't have been on her own. And I just think, well, you've been miserable in your relationship for however many years. And I always remembered, even as a teenager, saying to them both, if you're happier apart, be apart.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, I was too young to offer relationship advice, but I always said to them, I'd always hoped they would split up and that I would never have to go and stay with my dad. But I just think that was the best relationship advice I could give at that time. But even like as I got older, I always used to say to them, we would have been fine if you had split up. I mean, obviously you don't know how it will have affected their moods, but I would probably imagine they would have been a little bit happier.
Yeah.
So COVID happened, and my mum was very much like, oh, I'm alone, I'm miserable, nobody's staying with me. Obviously, at the start of the pandemic, it was very much nobody could swap households or anything either. So we weren't visiting, obviously. We were video calling. She got very low, which, everybody did. Everyone was low at that point. If I'm brutally honest, it was quite a good time for me because I was on maternity leave and I was in a little bubble with my family and nobody could get to me.
Yeah.
So it was quite nice. I didn't have my mum coming and being negative all the time. And it only started to get worse because my brothers were starting to go to university, which meant that she's now got the empty nest syndrome, and her negativity just got worse and worse and worse. And obviously, having my own children, I started to notice these little things like her being she wanted a lot of my attention. She wanted to be a part of my family and do things with my family. Not before this point, though. When my brothers were growing up, she wanted to do everything with them. When I had a baby, she was, can you get a babysitter? We can all go out. Now the boys are older, we can go out for drinks. And well, no, I don't want to do that now. I'm not 20 anymore. I want to sit with my baby. And she'd get quite annoyed that we wouldn't all get to go out. And she used to make comments about, oh, well, you're selfish because you're having children now. And when you just sort of like, we've always had quite a sarcastic family dynamic, but it's not funny. That it's real. That she's being deadly serious. So you can't just turn around and say, please don't do that, because whenever I did, that super defensive Oh, for goodness sake, it's only a joke. Why can't you take a joke? So yeah, so she always wanted me to go out and do things, go out for meals and things. I couldn't afford it. I was on maternity leave, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
And I wanted to stay in with my baby. It was my turn now to start my family. Yes, it's nice to have grandparents there, but she's not part of that anymore. She's not part of my like inner family now. This
Yeah.
is my time. So she started to get a little bit cross about that. She was very, yeah. So this is when I started to realize sort of like that level of enmeshment as well,
Yeah.
because she would want to come to family things with us, and she would say, okay, so if we can go and do this, or just for example, we're coming up to the festive season. Let's go and see Santa Claus. Well, I want to do that with my
Yeah.
baby daddy.
Yeah. Reasonable.
My husband. And we sort of want to do that as a family. I don't mind doing something with her as well.
Mm.
But we do also want to make our own memories. Well, that's not good enough. She wants to be
Mm.
involved, but it was always she wanted to be involved as me, her, and my children.
Yes.
And it was all the time, because that was our family dynamic before, because whenever we did anything, it was always me, her, and my brothers.
Yeah.
It never had my dad. My dad was never involved.
Mm.
So it was like she's still trying to carry on this family dynamic all the way through.
Almost like how dare you now have this family unit with a husband and partner who's supportive and wants to be
Yeah.
involved when I didn't get that.
Yes. And that's when it was, I always wanted your life. I always wanted what
Mm.
you had, but I didn't get that because dad was the way he was.
Mm.
Dad had an affair. Dad did this. It's not my fault.
Yeah.
But I was getting the thing is though, it's done so subtly,
Mm-hmm.
and you sort of like you start to feel sorry for her. So I'm then trying to do two lots of things. I'm trying to do things as a family with my partner, and then I'm trying to do things as a family with her, because it's always awkward when everybody's all together. And she just makes these ridiculous comments all the time, and it makes me feel awkward. And I don't know, I just started to see that level of enmeshment.
Mm.
Um, my dad, obviously, he hadn't really spoken. I mean, he's in and out of my life since I was 19, and normally around Christmas time he'd pop back in. That's the only time in a year I'd see him.
Yeah.
He'd start popping up about October, November time, ready for, do you want to come round for Christmas Day, sort of thing. He's only ever popping in and out. We are still having Christmases all together at this point, even when they've split up. So that's awkward in itself. And then it was 2 years ago. So it was after the pandemic. And he just randomly turned up in July, and came to my house, didn't know my youngest child's name. We just called her some random thing. And he was like, oh, I didn't think you'd answer the door to me. And I was like, well, I'm not going to sort of like shut the door on you. You're my
Yeah.
dad. And, because like I say, at this point, we still had a father-daughter relationship, but there's no, I don't know, he rings me once or twice a year. And he
Mm.
came in and he said, I'm really sorry that I don't have time to come and see you. I'm always at work. I was like, well, I'm always at work. And I said, but I'm just going to say this now. I said, you make time for your child.
Yeah.
You must make time for your child. I said, I don't know anything about you anymore. You don't know
Mm.
anything about me anymore. We don't have a relationship. What do you want here? Like, what? There's no admittance of what had happened. There's no acknowledgement of what had happened. But there was nothing. He was just sort of like, oh, but I don't have time to come and see you because I'm always really busy at work. I
Mm.
said, you drive past my house.
Yeah.
You literally drive past my house. If you really wanted to make an effort, you can come to my house. Not that I wanted him to, but that wasn't the point. I still crave a dad. I still
Yeah.
like look at other people that, I don't know, their dads are really proud of them, or their dads have walked them down the aisle or whatever. My dad never, he's never been proud of me. He's never been to any of my school stuff. He's never been interested in absolutely anything that I've done. It's always been about him and his interests, what he wants to do, and the family would always have to follow whatever he's done. And I just said to him, I said, you don't know anything about me anymore. And he was like, oh, right, well, that's because I work really hard. And I just looked at that point, I just looked at him and thought, this man cannot hear anything that I say. This man cannot, even if I started to bring up any of the abuse that I've endured over the years, this man cannot hear it.
Yeah.
He's got some level of belief that everything that he did was, it was okay and it was right, and he tried his best as a dad, and he can't hear me, he can't apologize, and he's never going to be able to listen to how I feel. So anyway, I let him talk at me. He had his cup of tea and he went, and that was the last time I saw him before he had a major heart attack,
Right.
which was actually this year. So it was well over a year, and I hadn't spoken to him at all. And he had a major heart attack, and basically we were told that he needs to have an operation and he's probably not going to make it.
Right.
So that week, there was a full week, I didn't go to the hospital. I felt very numb. Everything was like a big blur. There wasn't any feelings there at the time. It was just like this numbness. Even like going to work and everything, I was still going to work, but it was just a blur. I can't really explain how I felt that week.
Yeah.
But I remember being very much like I hoped he would die. And having those words come out your mouth about your own dad, that's horrid.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people out there that don't have their parents, and when you just sort of like, you can't say that out loud because that's not right, that's not okay,
But it's the truth.
it's the
And
truth.
it's
Yeah,
a
and
horrible thing
obviously
to
all the stuff
realize.
that I'd been through, I thought, that's it, I'm burying it with him.
Yeah.
And then he survived.
Mm.
And that's when the upset sort of like came, because I was sort of like, oh God, I wanted my own dad to die. I feel awful. And I then went to the hospital to see him with my brothers, and he just was this lifeless thing in intensive care. And bearing in mind, this was like the first time in over a year that I'd seen him or spoken to him, but obviously he was not awake or anything. And I went with my brothers and I just burst into tears. I was just absolutely like, oh God.
Yeah.
And I felt physically sick seeing him. And that was my goodbye to him. That was really hard. But that there and then, whether he survived or not, that was me saying goodbye.
Yeah.
And he survived. He's come out of hospital. He's home. He's fine. He's been given second chance at life, and I've not contacted him at all. And then after his birthday, he messages me, so why haven't you said happy birthday? Why haven't you come round to see me? And I'm thinking, well, obviously this man knows there's something wrong. There's something wrong with our relationship, surely. And I said to him, I was like, this was via text. He did ring me, but I didn't answer the phone. And I said to him via text, because we don't have a relationship, there is nothing, we haven't got anything here anymore. I don't want to start a relationship now just because of what's happened. And he basically said, well, I don't understand what's happened. I don't understand why you won't come round. And I explained to him that the past couple of years I've had to do a lot of work on myself just because of him. You know, regardless of my mum, just because of him and what he's done. And I didn't know whether to mention the sexual abuse there or not, but I wrote out a long list of things that, you know, I said, you've given me abandonment issues. You've left ever since I left the home, the family home. I don't exist to you. You've given me unhealthy attachment issues. You abused me, not the type of abuse. And and the emotional abuse that I've suffered throughout my life. And he didn't acknowledge any of it. He just said, well, I did my best. I've been through stuff. And then he started listing all the stuff that he'd been through. And I said, okay. And there's still no apology. There's still no apology. You still cannot acknowledge how you have treated me. I can't do this anymore. And he basically said, I wish you'd have told me this before I fought for my life to try and hang on to my life in the hospital. And I sort of like, half of me was like, please don't give me a suicide threat now. But he was very much like, I fought for my life just for you. And I thought, but you don't speak to me. You don't know I exist. But, just like any other narcissist, they're not nice to your face, but proud as punch behind my back, obviously.
It's all about centering themselves, isn't it? As that I've done my best, I've been a good dad, I fought for you. Everything that you've said is about centering himself as this amazing, wonderful person.
And exactly. And I said to him, I was like, we all try our best. I've been through enough trauma as well, but I'm seeking counselling, I'm seeking therapy, so that I can be a better parent, because I know that I've got issues. And now I'm trying to better myself so that I can try and give my children a half healthy, upbringing. I didn't get that at all because I had two broken parents that tried to raise me, and I have so much sympathy for that. What I don't have sympathy for is that they've got no drive to make themselves better at all. And they think that they can do it regardless. They think that, having some drugs and making yourself happy and playing with your kids is fine. He thinks he's having a good time. We are not so much. You have to think about the times when we'd play snowball fighting, for example. Most normal families maybe go out, play a little bit of snowball fighting, build a snowman. My dad would squeeze the water out of the snowballs so it made ice balls, and then he would throw it at us, and then think that's hilarious. And it's all those little things that come back. And going back to my mum, I've never told her about the abuse, and I still haven't told her about the abuse. Again, there's been so many times when I've wanted to, but I have so much of that. My upbringing was so bad, and you had such a good upbringing, and I've kept you safe all this time from your dad. And as soon as I start to say, I'll give you this example. So she told me once that her dad was an alcoholic, and he used to wake them up in the middle of the night to make them talk to him, because my nan wouldn't wake up to speak to him when he's too drunk. And she said we used to be so tired, and we used to would be up for school in the morning, but he'd make us stay up and chat to him because he was drunk and he'd need someone to talk to. And she said we'd be crying out for to go to sleep. And I said, Mum, Dad used to do that to me. I was like, I mean, he wasn't drunk, but I'd be going to work the next day and he'd come. I was always like, I always needed a lot of sleep, even back then. I'd go to bed at sort of like 9 o'clock, and this is my first job, my Saturday job, and I'd need to be up early for it. And my dad would get home at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and he'd literally rip the door open and sing in my room the top of his voice, and I'd be like, I'm so tired, I need to go to sleep, can you let me go to sleep, please? And I'd say that to mum, and she'd be like, oh, I know, but my dad did this, my dad did that. And it's in those moments where there's no safety to open up about what's happened, and I feel that if I ever told her, my biggest fear is she'd just make it about her.
Yeah.
And oh my God, it wouldn't be my trauma, it wouldn't be about me, it would be about her and how she feels about it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I've got that sympathy of, obviously, if I were in her shoes, I'd be devastated because I haven't been there to protect my child. And I get that she would be like that, but at this point in time, I don't need her to be like that. I need her to be there for me, and she can't do that. Even as a mum, now she's very much like, I had to raise my children without your dad. Well, he was there, he was living in the house, he just was a shit parent.
Yeah.
But it's okay, I'm not struggling because I've got my partner helps. I'm not struggling because we both work. I'm not struggling because we've got a happy relationship. No, I'm still struggling. I'm a working mum. I work full time. I've got 2 children who, what having toddlers is
Yeah.
like.
It's
It's hard
it's
work.
challenging.
Yeah, and I'm trying to heal from trauma to be the
Mm.
best loving mum that I can be, because I I don't want to be enmeshed with my children. I want them to be children. I want them to be happy. I want them to come to me and be able to tell me things, and me not to be like, well, what have you got to moan about? I had this to deal with. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, they could be having a tantrum. I could turn around to them and say, well, what have you got to be
Yeah.
Mardy about? Your dad didn't abuse you. Dad hasn't abused you. Do you know what I mean? It's that competitive trauma.
Mm.
I don't want to talk to her about something when I'm going to be made to feel that my problems are nothing.
Yeah. That's
So
it. It's that invalidation again, isn't it? You've had from your dad where he's not validated any of the things. He's not taken the time to apologize. He's not stepped forward and held his hands up and said, yeah, I need to be accountable for this or anything. It's just, well, I've done my best. And
yeah,
then to have it from your mum as well, and then almost weaponized as a, well, okay, yeah, that happened to you, but think of me in this. It's
yeah,
so, it just strips you of everything,
yeah,
because there's nothing there to say, actually, I hold my hands up and God, that must have been difficult for you. And I think when there are going to be so many people, I'm sure, who relate so much when you were talking about how nasty your dad was. I think we talk a lot on the podcast about covert narcissists and people who are very emotionally mature, very much like your mum, in terms of just almost in that land of Delulu where they've not
yeah.
quite grasped how they are behaving, but there was never anything that was vicious. There was never anything that was truly cruel. It was
Oh,
always
definitely.
just very much, oh, woe is me, and very much you need to be responsible for my emotions. You need to be the parent for me because I can't be the parent for you or for myself. But
Yes.
then when we talk about the experiences that you had with your dad, and that being a very classic overt narcissist where he's got that illusion of himself that women find him irresistible, and he's so, I'm so amazing, I'm so wonderful, I'm this great dad, but actually he's really bullying, and he always puts his needs and his wants in front of everybody. Everybody has to fall in line around him. If he's miserable, well, you better be miserable as well. And if you're
Yeah.
not miserable, he's going to make sure you are. If he's happy, but you're having a bad day, well, that's not acceptable. How dare you? And that is so classic for an overt narcissist, somebody who is that real sense of grandiosity. You know, when we talk about a narcissist and we think of that classic narcissist, the nasty person in the boardroom, the person who's really vicious to their family, the person who has those affairs and is completely unapologetic for it. It's your fault they've had it, right?
Yeah.
That, and you'd mentioned as well how he had the balls to be so overt and so uncaring that he was abusing you and making these comments, and then your mum was right there, could catch him at any moment. That's so common for an overt narcissist to feel so entitled to treat everybody this way that they can do it in public, blase, they don't care, because everybody thinks they're wonderful, so they don't care. And it's really difficult to be in that position as a child, because you don't understand all of the things that are going on around you. Even as a young teenager, you know this feels wrong. You know that you need to protect your younger siblings, which is not a position anybody should ever be in. And yet it's a position that you were thrust in because your dad was the way that he was a bully, he was cruel. That example that you gave of the snowball squeezing out the ice so that he could make sure it hurt, they're really classic things that dressed up as a nice family event, and if you complain about it, it's how dare you. Some kids don't get their dads play with
Stop
them.
being so sensitive.
Yeah, stop being so sensitive, stop being so ungrateful. I'm taking time out of my very important, very busy schedule where I have to work lots and I have all these people who need me and want me to be with you. Why are you crying that I've hit you in the face with a block of ice? How dare you? And that
He used to
kind
put
of,
them in the freezer as well to make them even
wow.
harder.
Yeah. And then think it was absolutely hilarious.
It's
That it
hilarious.
hurt.
Yes, a bit of fun and games. Maybe you should man up a little bit.
Yeah. It's so common to hear of those experiences with that overt dad. But again, I think sometimes when we talk about that, I say it's common. It's common if you know about overt narcissistic behavior, and it's common if you move in these circles where people talk about it. But because people don't talk about it, because they're shamed into not talking about it, it's not common to hear it unless you're actively seeking that healing. You're actively within communities that are, like you said, you want to be better for your children. You want to heal so that you can break that cycle and make a difference. But then when you have a parent who is sat in that victim space where she's saying, I protected you, that makes it doubly difficult for you to step forward to her.
That I found very tricky, because obviously when I've started to do healing and you start looking at what a narcissist is, you know, regardless of what an overt or a covert is, I can clearly sort of like make points about what my dad is. And that's where it's so confusing, because you don't know what to believe when my mum's saying some of the stuff she's doing. She's lying. Well, she lies, she parentifies, she's enmeshed, she's always in the victim role. And it's very confusing when you know that there's something wrong with one parent, but you're having this other care, you know, the other person, the other parent is the safe one, and I say that very lightly.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of like, well, who was I meant to trust when I was a child? Who was the safe parent? Because actually neither of them really were. It's just one of them was safer than the other.
Yeah.
And that's really quite sad. And it, as an adult, when you've got your children, that's very hard to come to terms with. And it's very hard to, I mean, I'm no contact with my dad now. I mean, I say that it's only been a few months. He might pop up again at Christmas, but he will not be welcome in my house now.
Yeah.
I have told my partner about the past, and obviously he's not stepping foot in this door.
Yeah,
You
of
know,
course.
he's never had any relationship or any contact with my children, so you know, there's been no risks there. But obviously since I've told my partner, he's like, you know, it's your choice what you need to do with this, but he's not coming in the house. And that sort of makes me it's sort of taken out of my hands. So
Yeah.
if he turned up at the door, it wouldn't just be me saying, no, you can't come in because of, whatever. There's someone behind me,
Yeah.
like on my side for once, saying,
That's
no,
it.
that was not okay. And I mean, he knew what he was like anyway, and he just sort of put up with him anyway.
Yeah.
But obviously, since knowing this, which I've only told him this year, he's not welcome. He's not, there's a big issue there, obviously.
Yeah, of
And rightly
course.
so.
And it's like you say, you finally got that support. You finally got someone behind you. You're not on your own with it. And
Yeah.
I think you'd mentioned that you've told him this year. I think that is, and we talked about this beforehand, that's so common to bury these memories and to keep them to yourselves and to hold them within, because you're told that you are the one who's to blame for it, that you are the one who's responsible for it. You'd got your dad saying to you, thank you, because I needed this affection, I needed this, it's your mum not giving me this. And then you've got your mum saying, well, I've protected you, I've done this, and you're the child stuck in the middle. And I think at the beginning you'd said, how can you do that to your child? And something that I often say when I work with clients or when we do these podcast episodes is, we're not meant to understand the how and the why, because no decent parent would
do that.
No, and no decent parent would understand how and why that would happen. No decent human being would understand how and why that would happen, in terms of how could you do that to your child? We might understand the psychology behind it, but how do you follow through and make it justifiable in your own brain? Baffling. And it's meant to baffle us, because we look at our own children. And again, you'd said how things started to rush up for you when you had your own children. That's just so common. It's so common, because all of a sudden you're presented with these kids that you would do anything to protect, that mean the world to you, that you want to better yourself for, and you think, well, why the fuck couldn't you do that for me? Like,
exactly.
What was going on through your mind, where I'm seeing these wonderful babies and you've done this?
Exactly. And you sort of like, you see how, because obviously my mum's still in my life, and I'm holding her at a distance at the moment. I'm not ready to cut her off. I'm not sure I ever will. I don't know. But I definitely hold her at the end of a barge pole. I don't tell her too much. I don't tell her how I'm feeling, because I don't want that competitiveness. But sometimes I find, like, I can see when she's with my children, she compares my children, and she'll say, oh, things about their behavior or about the way they are. And if they're doing something bad, oh, that's definitely my partner's side of the family. If they're doing something good, that's definitely my side of the family. Take after Nana, not Mum. And I'm just sort of like, oh yeah, because
That makes perfect sense, of course.
Yeah. And I can see these little things that she's trying to do to put that competitive streak in them, because I would like to say that me and my siblings are quite close, but I don't think there's anything close about us, if I'm brutally honest.
Right.
I think we've never, obviously when people talk about narcissism and they say the roles in the family, that you've got like your scapegoat, your golden child, and your invisible one. Now, there's three of us, and I'd like to say that I could probably tell you who is who. However, I was thinking about this the other day, and I feel that the role changes all the time in our family. And all I feel is that when I look back, we've been pitted against each other, and we've been made to compete for the affection and the attention of our parents all the way through our lives, that it's impossible to for us to have this bond, because even when we're all together now, we all take the mick out of each other. We all go too far with the mick taking, and it's only been sort of like, as I say, since I've had my children, that I've been, don't do that. Why are we picking at each other's appearance? Why are we picking at something we can't change about ourselves? Why are we doing this? And it's getting better, but I've only started to see that my mum sits and says things about my two children. And I'm like, we've literally been put against each other our entire lives, please don't do that to my children. So
Yeah.
it's very difficult to sort of like step in, but I'll either say something so it's sort of like nicey so she doesn't react,
Yeah.
or I will say something after she's gone. I'm still not at that stage where I'm brave enough to challenge her when she's there and in the moment, because I go very withdrawn. I guess it's something I've always done, because if she says something, if she shuts me down for something that I said, I just stop.
Yeah.
That's it. I've been put in my place, sort of thing. And even in my 30s, I'm still doing that.
Yeah.
And again, something that I'm working on and I need to work on to protect my children. However, that distance is there now. I'm not, we don't have as much contact with her, and I don't let her have contact with my children without me being there.
Yeah.
Because that's my way of protecting them. And, as I say, I'm trying to heal from that as well as the abuse, because well, I mean, when I started to obviously unpick a little bit with my counsellor, it's not easy having two girls and having your partner bath them, or I mean, they're not, neither of them at the age that I was when the abuse started, but and I don't open like constantly watch them, but the amount of times that I've stood on the stairs and listened to how my partner is with them in the bath, or they always run around naked. I've never known girls to want to be naked so
Yeah.
much. I was very uncomfortable about it to start off with, and I'd constantly be like, will you put some clothes on, especially when Dad's in the house. But then when I've obviously spoken about it to my counsellor, she's been sort of like, I grew up in a very different household to what my partner did. And I've got to, I know that I'm always going to probably have that in the back of my head, but I'm monitoring that. And whether it's right for me to monitor it or not, I don't know, but it makes me feel a little bit better about it at the moment. But yeah, we did talk through it, and she said they're really comfortable in their bodies and they're really comfortable at home. And that just made me relax so much, because I thought I know obviously I was a little bit older, but there is not a chance I would have walked around naked or even been naked in my house, even in my bedroom at home. So, they are very comfortable to do that. And I've got to let them do. I want them to be body positive,
Yeah.
So
And
I
you
just
want
have
them to be
to,
comfortable, don't you? You want
absolutely.
that comfort, but equally, it's really difficult. And this is why I say nothing will trigger you like having kids,
Yeah.
because you will look at your own experiences. And like you say, I couldn't even be comfortable in my own bedroom, in your own private room.
Yeah.
You couldn't feel comfortable to be nude.
Yeah.
Even as a child. And I mean, children, my mum still run around in the garden naked at times. And I'm like, look, guys, come on. There's neighbors. And they're like, whatever, YOLO. And it's wanting that comfort for them, whilst also then being mindful of the fact that not only did you never have it, but that comfort means something very different, very threatening to you.
Yeah. I mean, even like, obviously, I'm thinking I wouldn't I wouldn't be naked in my bedroom. When getting out the bath or shower, I remember I used to put the towel on me very quickly, because it would be hilarious for my dad to be stood at the bathroom window making a joke of it again. And that, again, that was very open, that was very overt. It would be, I'm joking, I'm banging on the window, because we lived in a bungalow, so obviously you could see. And my mum wouldn't think anything of that, because again, he's joking, it's hilarious, I just need to live a little, get a grip. But that was not safe for me. That was uncomfortable, and especially when you're starting to develop as a teenager. And as I say, I'm quite happy for my children now. If they want to run around naked, that's up to them. I'm a little bit more comfortable about it now, and as I've spoken through it with my counsellor, I'm mindful of it, but I'm a little bit more relaxed now, knowing the signs. And after speaking to my husband about it, got them the book about their body parts being their own and
Yeah.
what's acceptable for them. Can't remember what the book was that I got, but it's an age appropriate book for them
Yes,
anyway.
yeah, that kind of explains consent. And
Yeah,
yeah, I think I remember the kids coming back from school once talking about, is there a pants rule or something like that? Like there's a
the
rhyme or something that,
Pantosaurus.
yeah, there's a rhyme or something that goes around the pants area. And I remember thinking, gosh, that's really good that they're kind of talking
Yeah,
about, because when we were growing up, that was not something that would have been discussed. It would have just
yeah,
been like,
exactly.
you'd have had a horde of parents in the 90s going into school like, how dare you imply this?
Yeah, why are
When
we doing this?
actually
Yeah,
it was necessary. It's
yeah,
always necessary.
yeah, definitely. I did start it, obviously my youngest, I think she was definitely about 3 when we started to talk about anything like that, and it might be very young to some people, but I think when you've been through what I have, and with it being someone that's so close to you,
Yeah.
and someone that's meant to be, my dad was meant to be the safest person, the safest man to me, the person that's meant to look after me. He's meant to be my favorite man, you know,
Yeah.
regardless of my partner or my brothers. He's meant to be my favorite man, and he is the person that I'm most unsafe with,
Yeah.
and that's quite sad. It's, you know. And then my mum's very unsafe too.
Yeah.
I mean, I can laugh about it in a minute, but you know, you have these moments where you feel okay about it and you feel on top of the world. And then you get to this time of the year where it's, you know, it's about Christmas time, and then you realise that your family isn't the best family. But I'm creating my own family. My own
Yeah.
family's a nice family. So
Yeah.
we're all getting there, and I'm on a healing process. I'm making good steps, and I'm doing the right things. And I've found, you know, the community online with this podcast, with the Insight podcast that I follow. It's a good community to be in, and without having to be sort of like directly face to face with people all the time. It's nice to have people on the end of a phone or in a group chat or whatever it's because my best friends are great.
Yeah.
But they don't understand,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that they are amazing. They really are amazing. And I have told them, and they know everything about my life. You know, we've been friends for a very, very long time. But unless you talk to somebody that's been through this sort of thing, or not necessarily the abuse, but with toxic parents,
Yeah.
then people don't understand, unfortunately. And they
No,
don't
they
want them
don't.
to understand either.
Yeah, that's it. You don't want them to understand, but you do want the understanding, but they
Yes.
don't understand. And it's really difficult to find understanding. And, you know, to find, you either get the classic, but it's your dad, or but it's your mum, and oh, come on, you let bygones be bygones, or you get complete horror that that's happened to you, but also oh, how do we talk about this? How do we, you know, if you'd have gone to them and said, I just hoped that he'd die, then that, to me, I hear that and think, God, that's going to be so relatable for so many people. I've thought that about my mum.
Yeah.
I've thought that and thought, goodness me, you know, when is she just not going to be here anymore, so that it's just done?
Yeah. Yeah, because
And
I think you generally feel that when they die, all the pain's going to go away.
yeah,
I don't think it is.
no, it doesn't,
But
unfortunately. My dad is dead, and no, he didn't take it with him,
no,
which is
exactly.
absolute bullshit, because, you know, that would have been the only time that he would have come through for me.
Exactly.
But unfortunately, it doesn't go away. But you do have that. It would be easier grieving what is now gone
Yes,
than
then
grieving
when they're still
them.
alive, I
Yeah, grieving
definitely
them
hear
still
that.
here,
Yeah,
and grieving what should be but can't be, as
yeah,
opposed to what should have been and what couldn't have been because of what they were. And I do think there is something in that, where there is that finality when they're gone and they're
yeah,
dead, of you're not hoping that they will one day wake up and go, I need to be accountable for this.
yeah.
I need to make amends. Even if you wouldn't have trusted it if they tried to make amends, you just
No,
know that
I
they're not
definitely
about to
get
try and
that.
do it.
I feel that with my dad, I've I've half grieved him because he's been in and out of my life so much that
Mm,
he's not a solid figure in my life for me to depend on. Whereas because obviously my mum's still in my life a lot, that's harder to grieve that she's not going to be the mum that I want or need.
yeah.
Um, and I love her. I love her to death. I really do. But I have to love her at a distance, because
Yeah.
she hurts me so much, and it doesn't matter what I say, or I'll not see her for a few weeks, and then she'll come round, and she'll be really, really nice, and I'm like, this is it, this is it.
Yeah.
And then the next time she comes over, I'm like, oh, she'll walk through the door and she'll go, hi bitch.
Mm.
And that just instantly, like, why do you do that? Like, I don't want to call my children names. Like,
Mm.
why do you come in and want to call me a name when the minute you walk in the door and start, and she'll be like, oh, you're right, I'm a bit tired from work. Oh, well, I've got so much going on at work, and
Mm.
oh, at least you've got the no.
Yeah.
Stop comparing to me the minute you walk in the door. And I immediately just go back into grey rocking or whatever, making myself
Mm-hmm.
as uninteresting as possible. And I just don't know. I'm just a person. I'm not there.
Yeah.
I'm just this figure in the kitchen half the time.
Yeah.
um, but that sort of, I'm constantly going backwards and forwards with, she's okay now because I've left it a few weeks, and then, oh, there it is, there she
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. There
Welcome
she
back.
is. Yeah.
And that's hard. That's really hard.
It is. That is really difficult. And that hope, I think, is always what gets us as
Yeah, it just
adult
gets crushed.
children of dysfunction. It's that hope that is the most difficult thing to come to terms with and to navigate. It really is. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me and for being so brave. I can't tell you how impactful I think your story will be, and how much it will help other people to realize that they're not alone in their experiences, because it's very rarely talked about. And if it is, it's kind of in a diagnostic terms of this is what happens and this is how it looks and this is why. And just to hear someone's lived experience is going to be so powerful for so many people in realizing they are not alone in this. These experiences, especially where you've not spoken to your other parent about it, you've not spoken to siblings about it, it's not something that's come out to the light yet in
Yeah,
everything, but has for you, and you're working through it in your own terms. That's really relatable, I feel, and
yeah,
something that's so
definitely. And
important.
obviously, I just do want to stress, obviously, I am coming around to it in my own time. I know that I'm only just starting to come to terms with this, and I know that at the moment I'm okay, but I know that when it comes to my siblings having children,
Yeah.
it's going to be a whole different ball game, because
Mm.
things are going to have to be said. It's At the moment, my dad has no access to other children.
Yeah.
But like I say, when my siblings come to have children, that's not going to be safe,
Yeah.
and that's going to throw a whole different ball game in
Mm.
there. But we will cross that bridge when we get to it. My nieces and nephews will not be put at risk. Neither
Yeah.
will my children. I can keep my children safe, but unfortunately, I think when that does happen, I'm going to have to say something. Unfortunately, it's one of those things, but I can't put my nieces and nephews at risk
Mm.
if and when that eventually happens. If they even have children, they might not.
Yeah.
You never
They
know.
might not,
But
you don't know, but it is that. And then again, there's that responsibility that is placed
yeah,
on you when it
again,
should
yeah,
never be on you. And it's a
no,
constant cycle of things that are placed
yeah.
on you. And as you say, you would ensure that they weren't placed at risk. That's something that you feel very passionate about. But it's almost that
But it's always
parentification
it's going to
happening again.
impact. Yeah, it's going to impact me significantly, but that
Mm.
will also have a massive impact on my mum and my brothers as well.
Yeah,
So
of course. Yeah, it's the inevitable, and it's always having to pay for the choices that your parent made
yeah,
that were not your
because
responsibility.
they didn't want to get the therapy that they needed.
Mm.
And in the words of my mother, I don't need to pay for therapy. I've got you and friends to talk to.
Yeah, I've heard that. If I had a penny for every time I heard somebody say to me, my parent used to say, whether it be in a jokey way or whether it be just bluntly, I did dead serious, I don't need to pay for therapy, I've got you, or I've got your dad, or I've got friends. Usually it was I've got you.
No, but I need to
And
pay for
it's like,
therapy for
yeah,
you.
I now need to pay for therapy because you thought that. Yeah. So if you want to pay for therapy in some form, pay for mine now because of all the
Yeah,
shit that you put
yeah.
on me as a
We
child.
really should invoice them, shouldn't we?
Yes. I did see, somebody did say to me once when they pass away, they were like, I want nothing from them. And then they went, actually, no, scrap that. I really hope I am still in the will because they can fully just pay for all of the shit. I'm going to take it as remuneration. And I'm like, yeah, I
Absolutely.
like that. I
My
agree.
compensation.
Yeah, my compensation for your absolute bullshit. It's,
Yeah,
yeah,
your fixed
compensation.
parenting.
Yeah, your shit parenting, my compensation, and that's how we're going to take it. And yeah, I can relate to that very deeply. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. As always, guys, thank you so much for listening. If you do have any questions or you would be interested in being a guest on the podcast, then you can get in touch with me online, either at Toby and Rue, which is my Instagram, or via email, which is harriet@tobyandrue.com. You can also find the Unfollowing Mum pages across social media where there are loads of helpful resources. You can get in touch with me on there. I'm just a little bit slower at getting back to you. Bye.